It is an absolute honor this morning to be joined here in the Sports Corner by Pulitzer Prize winning author Buzz Bissinger, a native New Yorker. Welcome back to the Bronx, Buzz. We get a chance this morning to talk about your latest book, the first opportunity for you to speak about the game of football since the critically acclaimed Friday Night Lights. Buzz, how are you doing?
Well, you're always looking for good ideas. They're hard to find. It takes me sort of a minimum of 5 to 6 years to, you got to have an idea not only that you love, you got to have an idea that you think will work, where you can really tell a story from beginning to end, a narrative that's going to capture the reader. I was on the internet. People say, well, how'd you find out about this game? All I remember is I was on the internet. I'm sure I was on deadline and screwing around on the internet because that's what writers do to avoid writing. And I came upon this thing called the Mosquito Bowl. And it first did a double take. And then, wait a sec, this game is played on Guadalcanal in the Pacific in the middle of nowhere. And then keep reading. And wait a sec, it's two regiments playing against another. And they're loaded with some of the best college football players in the country. And then, wait a sec, they built goalposts for the game and a regulation field out of dirt and coral, and printed up programs, and it was broadcast over the PA system and broadcast on radio over what they call the Mosquito Network to parts of the Pacific. 1,100 Marines who were both drunk and had gambled on the game. I said, this is surreal. This is surreal. I'd never heard of this. And virtually no one has heard of it today. And then read more and find out that of the 65 men, and they were really boys, we think of them as men because of their responsibilities. Of the 65 who played, many of them officers, 15 were later killed several months later after they shipped out for Okinawa. Guadalcanal was being used as the training area. And, when I read that, I said, there's a story to be told to preserve the memories of this men, to really depict what war is really like. And the key is, in anything, you got to fall in love with the characters. And so the goal of the book was to take some of these men who played, start really almost at the beginning of their lives, and take the reader through all the way with ups and downs and writing about other things in the horror, absolute horror. And that's a bad word to describe it, but that's what comes to mind. The absolute horror of Okinawa, where 240,000 people died in 82 days, Americans, Japanese, and civilians.
And at that time, the largest number of American athletes to die in a single battle.
And great men, not perfect, but great, fine men who were willing to do their duty without question and sacrifice without question. And the book really tries to get at that, how beautiful they were, whatever flaws they had. I describe them as ordinary men rising to extraordinary circumstances. And I think that's the best thing you can be in life. And I think very few of us actually achieve that. These men did, to preserve our freedoms.
Plus, before we got a chance to come on and speak about the book, talking so much about baseball, and I'm such a sports junkie and guru. And coming into this conversation, I was thinking to myself about one game that was played at Yankee Stadium, arguably always called the greatest game ever played, right? The championship game, 1958, Giants and the Colts. And I started thinking to myself that maybe, just maybe, that the Mosquito Bowl is the greatest game ever played.
Yeah, you've probably seen this. All these books come out. The greatest game ever played, the most important game ever played. That'll be on the cover of the book. It wasn't the greatest game ever played. I mean, the score was 0-0. They didn't have pads or anything. They did beat the crap out of each other, and a lot of guys got hurt. But that was part of the fun. I mean, they were physical. They were physical guys. But if you look at the later repercussions, it was without a doubt the most tragic game ever played. You have 65 vibrant young men playing football, having a ball, having a blast for 3 hours, doing something that they loved. It was on December 24th of 1944, which was on purpose. It was part of bringing the United States to these guys living 7,000 miles away in the middle of in the middle of nowhere, and then 15 of them die 4 or 5 months later. That to me is the most tragic game ever played, when initially is one of the most beautiful and one of the most improbable. I mean, come on. A football game, a really simulated football game on Guadalcanal, in the Pacific, when it's hot and there are mosquitoes and crabs and alligators. It was surreal.
I would say if it's not the greatest, it's definitely the most improbable game ever played.
Yes, I appreciate that. I think that's true. I think that's true.
I think one of the things that the book illustrates is that football basically is a training mechanism for war. I was hoping to get your perspective on that.
Well, I mean, that was another thing that I found fascinating. The Army was pretty reticent about football. The Army had officer training programs on college campuses, but you were not really a student, and you certainly were not allowed to participate in extracurriculars like football. The Navy felt that football was the single best source of combat training. And it makes sense because, what's football about? Discipline, teamwork. At that point in time, violence, because, you played hurt. That was part of it. Coaches wanted guys to play hurt to show how tough they were. So you have teamwork, discipline, violence, playing through pain, and never giving up. And those are part of the qualities that you do need when you're in combat. So the Navy started officer training programs in which you were a student at various campuses and could play football. And a lot of these guys took advantage of that before they went into the Marines.
Not only a fantastic writer, but also a fantastic researcher. This book takes you 5 years, Buzz. And I read that you said that you told the publisher that this book saved your life. Why did you tell the publisher that?
Yeah, and I'm careful to exaggerate, but I think in a sense it definitely is true. Before tackling the book in 2017 and 18, I was kind of reeling, and when people reel, they do stupid things. There's a certain self-destructiveness because you're scared. I had no work. I mean, literally, I had a great run with Vanity Fair magazine for over 2 decades, but a new regime came in. And when a new regime comes in, I get this, they want their own writers. I understand that. So that was gone. I did not have a book idea. This was, ringing around in my head. And, what am I going to do? I'm on my own. I've been on my own a long time. And, I got a family to support. And that shook up my head. And then I went public with some things that I regret. I talked way too much about sexual appetites and things like that. And I really regret it. I went too far, and I realized you got to get back to your roots. You've been doing all this different stuff in your life, and I did talk radio for a while. I went to Hollywood for a while. I was doing this, I was doing that. And I said, you got to go back to what you're really good at. You got to go back to Friday Night Lights or other books that I've written. And so I said, all right, let's do it. And when this became a book, when it was accepted, I felt, all right, I'm on the right track now. I'm on the right rudder. I'm focused. I have the focus that I need in life. And the focus was to try to create the best book I possibly could, and I'm really proud of it. I think it's my best book. People blank. I should say, well, how can it be better than Friday Night Lights? It's a much more complex story. The stakes are much higher. Obviously, high school football, the stakes were high in Odessa, but this is literal, life and death. And you're reading to see who makes it and, who doesn't. There's a lot of tragedy involved, but there's definitely a lot of uplift in what these men were willing to do.
I think even for you to get a chance sometimes to kind of pull back and say to yourself, like, what an incredible career it's been. I mean, even being able to like write NYPD Blue. I mean, you've done so many different things.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. And part of life is really figuring what are you good at, what are you not good at. But part of life is trying. I don't regret any of the experiences that I've had, except I've hurt people. And when you hurt people, that really causes you pain and agony. And there were times when I terribly hurt my wife. We're doing great, we're back together, but I hurt her, and that was really hard.
Very sad.
It was a documentary that came out, maybe you see it, called Buzz, and that parts of it were just, as I watched it, it was painful because of what I'd done to her. And she's an amazing, really smart, fabulous, beautiful woman, and I'm lucky. I mean, I know that I'm lucky, and she's in the background telling me what I should say. And will you just be quiet? We're having a nice conversation here. What the hell's wrong with you? Oh, she's just saying lucky, and she's nodding. So I guess we are going to get divorced after the show is over. And she stood by me not only in the Mosquito Bowl. She had some great ideas. She had some really, unstructured. She read it. He said, I love it, but I think there's structural problems. She was great. My son, Caleb, who's 31, was amazing. I mean, amazing. He read it, and man, he did not hold back. Oh, my God. But he said, I love it, but it's too long in places. You should cut it. And he was right. So we actually held publication. It's supposed to come out Father's Day. And I said, literally, like the day before, guys, it's not ready. It's just not ready. And I won't let it come out. needs more work. And I'm glad we had that extra 3 or 4 months. It made a huge difference.
That was part one of our interview with Pulitzer Prize winning author Buzz Bissinger on the Mosquito Bowl. Tune in next time for part number 2.